In what the opposition has described as the Seinfeld summer, the summer of nothing for Prime Minister Mark Carney, in advance of Parliament resuming, Prime Minister Carney is trying to get ahead of some of what will be inevitably very difficult questions about what Canada is doing, how we are moving our economy. So he announced some major projects. Here's the Prime Minister.
So today, as you know, Canada's new government is announcing the first set of projects that we believe are both in Canada's national interest and are feasible to be built. The proponents behind the first tranche of these projects have already done much of the hard work. They've undertaken already extensive consultations with Indigenous peoples, consultations that meet the standards of existing legislation. They've worked extensively with provincial and territorial governments and local authorities, and already meet many of the necessary regulatory standards. This is the first tranche of projects. We expect the second tranche of projects to be announced by the Grey Cup. First, LNG Canada Phase 2, its expansion in northern British Columbia. This will directly help transform our country into an energy superpower. Second project is the Darlington New Nuclear Phase 1. This project will make Canada the first G7 country to have an operational small modular nuclear reactor. It will drive $500 million annually, every year, into Ontario's nuclear supply chain. Taken together, these projects can deliver transformational benefits to Canadians, driving growth in jobs and incomes for decades, diversifying our energy sources and our markets, connecting our country, and connecting our country with the world.
So, Brian, there is Prime Minister Carney, and we've been saying it too. You know what's been going on. We have this fancy new project, big project czar that's been announced, and so here he is talking about these projects. But there is a bit of an asterisk around many of these, are there not?
Yeah, there are projects that were already going ahead.
Right.
This is the guy that all through the Liberal leadership, all through the election said, we need to think big, we need to act bigger, we need, even on election night, I think that was the actual quote, we need to think big and act bigger at speeds never seen before.
Mhm.
Well, what's he approving? Okay, phase 2 of LNG Canada to Kitimat, BC. That was already happening. Darlington Nuclear small modular reactors project. That was already happening. Expanding the Port of Montreal, Coquerico. That was already happening. Go through the list. So these are our projects that are supposed to be thinking big and acting bigger. And then he's got another list that down the road they'll consider. Look, some of that is good. Things like the Wind West Atlantic Energy Initiative that Tim Houston's supporting out of Nova Scotia. I've talked to the Premier about that. Pathways Plus Carbon and Capture Project in Alberta. But a high-speed rail between Toronto and Quebec City. That's just a Liberal pipe dream that they talk about forever. That, look, first time I went to a news conference about that, David Collinette was the transport minister. And an awful lot of our viewers are going to have to say, who is David Collinette? And they're going to reach for the Google machine. So, and also, I don't think that is an economy boosting national project other than it will cost a lot of money in terms of construction. It's not going to unleash the economy. So why are these projects important? Because beyond the tariffs, Donald Trump is fundamentally transforming the US economy. We have to do the same for our economy. So we need big ideas. There's no oil pipeline on there. There's no plan for an oil pipeline. And these are baby steps that will not unleash the economy. They're things we should be doing, but they're not thinking big, acting bigger at speeds never seen before.
You know, Lori, it's not that we are mocking these projects. It's in fact, it's quite the opposite. It's good that there perhaps has been a reiteration that these are going on and they're going to be carried on. It's just to that broader point. There's no pipelines here. There's nothing on this list that is going to what so many have said, including former Prime Minister Harper. We need to continue as Canadians to insulate our economy from being so inextricably linked to the United States, looking for those new markets. And that, in part, a big part, is through pipelines development. And LNG exportation. Don't see any of that here.
Well, there is a thing too. Again, it's a previous project. It's the LNG product in Kitimat, BC, and they're talking about enhancing it. Okay, that's fine. I think what we're seeing with Prime Minister Carney is that he oversold a whole bunch of things to Canadians during the election, and it worked, right? Elbows up, right? Okay, our elbows don't seem to be up right now. National energy, you see, to me, it was clever politically, because when you think of a nation building project, what do you think of in our history? You think of the railway, right? This incredible thing that united this very disparate, geographically diverse country. So when I was looking at it, I go, okay, a national energy corridor, that's a good idea, because if you're going to electrify the whole country in the name of fighting climate change, and use artificial intelligence to do it, which creates an enormous strain on the hydro systems. We're going to have to revamp the whole hydro systems. And since they're provincial, it would be good to have a national vision of, okay, what do we want to get to? You know, how can we, break down barriers about electricity transport? You know, how does Quebec help Ontario? How does Ontario help BC? How does Alberta, so that's one. I also, the absence of any oil and gas pipeline, it didn't surprise me. They floated out the day before, well, there hasn't been there's not a private sector offer. Well, yes, but there's not going to be a private sector offer until the Carney government clarifies a lot of things, beginning with, what's your emissions cap? What's your emissions cap on oil and gas? We need to know that. What's going to happen to the no pipelines bill? What's going to happen to now? In fairness, they are trying to streamline some things, but what does the consent of Indigenous people mean when you're talking about these things? If you've got 20 tribes out of 24 who want this because they think it'll help their people and they'll share in economic benefits, and 4 that don't, well, what does that mean? When you say they have to be listened to, yeah, of course they have to be listened to. But what does that mean? So to me, what we saw with these latest announcements, and I'm not but they're small beer. Governments announce these kinds of things all the time. We're going to support this mine here. We're going to support this, the nuclear industry here. But yeah, okay, that's great. For heaven's sakes, Ontario, primarily the feds, Ontario and Quebec, have earmarked more than $50 billion for an electric vehicle industry that currently is, things aren't going as planned. So to me, it's like, okay, look, I get you. This is the initial one. You're going to have more, but you've got to have a bigger vision. And if you have a bigger vision, you're going to have to change policies that you made that discourage those visions coming to reality. And that, to me, is when the rubber will hit the road.
Well, perhaps that's part of the problem, Brian, is maybe they don't have a bigger vision. Maybe they recognize that through just terrible legislation that was put in with the former Trudeau government, there's only so many things, so many achievements that under this current iteration of Liberal government, they're going to be able to accomplish.
I'll tell you a story that I heard from someone in industry. Um, you know, they're trying to be open-minded about Mark Carney, about Tim Hodgson, his Minister of Energy and all of that, because they're saying a lot of the right things. And so these industry leaders go into a meeting and they're talking to them and they're like, okay, yep. And then eventually Carney says, well, remember, I have a caucus to manage. That's what he told the industry leaders. I have a caucus to manage. And you heard the other day that there's a number of MPs in the Liberal caucus who are going to form an environmental caucus within the Liberal Party because they don't feel that Carney's paying enough attention to the environment and climate change now. So, he's going to have part of his caucus pushing back on these things. But he does need to change policy. This line that, well, there's no proponent for an oil pipeline, that's garbage. Why is there no proponent? Enbridge and TC Energy, what used to be TransCanada, they held calls with analysts and investors the other couple of weeks back, and they said that for the next fiscal year, because the regulatory environment is so bad in Canada, most of their capital spend, almost all of it, is going to the United States. That's billions and billions of dollars. And they just said the regulatory environment, because of things that Lorrie mentioned, Bill C-69, the emissions cap, the West Coast tanker ban, on and on, they don't see that there's a plausible way to invest in Canada. So the government has put these regulations in place first. They need to lift some of them to be able to encourage people to step forward. I was sitting with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in Calgary last weekend, and she said, unless these things are changed, no one will come forward. And that goes to your point, Adrienne. You know, they've got to be able to go get past some of their own pieties.
Yeah. And, Lord, last word to you. I think that's really, when we talk about these big projects and we talk about nation building and continuing to grow Canada's economy, because the last few fiscal quarters have not been good, the capital resources that are coming into Canada is limited. I mean, if you're an investor, you're not looking at this environment with its red tape and its regulation and its fractured policies and thinking this is where I want to put my resources and this is where I want to invest. They are looking at the United States because President Trump is going in the opposite direction. They're reducing the regulatory frameworks. Their environmental commissioner, Lee Zeldin, he's saying, we're getting permits, we're getting things done. So I understand, appreciate that Mark Carney is a money guy, he's a numbers guy. I think he looks at some of the liberal policies and is probably thinking, what the hell is this? I think he recognizes just how stupid some of them are. But again, it's political. He's got a caucus, and then the country is held hostage by this.
Based on that observation from Brian, which is fascinating, that he says I have a caucus. My concern is that this is a guy who's never been a politician before, who's being captured by the bureaucracy. A lot of the people that surround him are people from the Trudeau era, and the only thing I would say to him is, you have enormous political capital right now. You saved the Liberal Party from desolation, from third place. Your numbers months after the election are very good. And on the projects you're talking about, that you're not talking about, like oil and gas, the public's behind you. Spend your political capital now. That's what great leaders do. They realize that it's never going to be as good for me as it is right now. And in terms of the caucus, he controls the caucus. Remind them what they were facing before he was there. Remind those cabinet ministers how many of them quit because they thought they were going to be decimated and came back because of the successful campaign, and he's put them in cabinet. You owe me, folks. The other problem, of course, I think he's worried about is some of his, if you're talking about things like fossil fuels and emissions and that, his past statements about, he thought carbon taxes were too low, blah, 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 blah. Who cares? Who cares what his positions were in the past? What we want for all Canadians is to prosper going forward. And so I think the other thing he's finding out, there was an old line by an Ontario Tory cabinet minister years ago, he said to the opposition when they had won the election and the opposition was coming to power, you guys are going to find it's a lot harder to catch the spears than throw them. And to me, that's what Carney was able to run as against the Trudeau government, not really against Poilievre, but against the Trudeau government. Okay, well, now you're there. You've rescinded a lot of their policies. You've borrowed a lot of policies from the Conservatives, right? So don't be timid about that. You can do these things if you want to. Now, if a court shuts something down, okay, we tried, right? But when you have a first announcement like this, and there's nothing, as far as I could see, on the Ring of Fire in Ontario, which is crucial to the electric vehicle supply chain, unless we want to get all the stuff, the raw materials from China. Okay, it's not in the first round. I understand there'll be more rounds, but this to me was just an inauspicious beginning. Step in the right direction, but a baby step. And we need a lot more than that to turn this economy around.
Well, it's certainly time for the Carney government to think much bigger because what we heard today was quite anemic. Well, let us know what you think in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel and go to the torontosun.com. You'll find commentary and coverage there you will not find anywhere else.